Welcome to our closing webinar of our Ruler Institute online. My name is Nikki. I'm the Director of Product Development and Implementation at the Center, where I've worked for over 21 years with Mark, who's going to do the majority of the presentation today as a recording. So the first thing I want to say after what I just said is congratulations, you made it. This was the first step of your school adopting Ruler, attending this training. So you and the others on your team, you are the Ruler implementation team at your school. You will hopefully grow your team, ask others to join the team, and bring this back to your school. You have an extra 6 weeks. We're in week 6 now. You have an extra 6 weeks to finish up the training, to go back to things in order to earn your certificate of completion. And then you already have been given access to Ruler Online, which is our platform that you can invite all of the staff in your school to go to. It's a separate platform that has the curricular stuff from pre-K to 12 and other things that we're going to talk about today. But you have 6 more weeks in the training portal. So just to recap what we've covered in the last 6 weeks, which you may have gotten to already, or you may go back to and finish up. We talked about the mindset, just that emotions matter. They affect everything we do: attention, memory, learning, relationships, health, our everyday performance. We talked about the 5 Ruler skills and the approach to Ruler that you're going to bring back to your school. We talked about the charter as a way to build and sustain positive emotional climates throughout the school, in classrooms, and also in students' homes. We went through the mood meter as a way to build all of the Ruler skills. We check in on the mood meter, and importantly, we don't just say, where are we on the mood meter? We say, what is the best word to describe where we are? And we get there by thinking about the why, the cause. And then we say, do we want to stay where we are? Is this a helpful place to be, for instance, in the next hour together? If it is a helpful place to be, what's our strategy for staying there? If it's not a helpful place to be, where do I want to be? What do I want to feel? And what's my strategy for getting there so that my emotion is helpful for instance, the next hour we have together? We talked about the meta moment, which is really just a way of putting our best self forward in the moment when we are experiencing an intense emotion. So we sense, we pause, we breathe to kind of deactivate everything that's happening in the body and mind. We see our best selves, and then we pick a strategy that aligns with our best self to get through that moment in a more helpful way. And then finally, we talked about the blueprint, and it's really a set of questions that we can use to reflect on conflict or to restore communities affected by conflict with a blueprint conference using the same set of questions. So you may have had a chance to go into our Ruler Online platform and see all of these pieces. You got the majority of the staff content in the training, but you'll also see on Ruler Online staff meeting activities, learning modules for everyone in your staff, teaching and non-teaching staff to use. All of our curricular components from pre-K to 12, including routines. We call them core routines that embed right into the classroom. There are out of school time resources on the platform, and then lots of resources for engaging families and educating families, including slides and letters home. You'll also see a bunch of other things like trauma-informed resources, like resources on the Ruler principles. So lots of stuff there on Ruler Online. In the staff development stuff, you'll see at the top of the screen where it says courses. Those are the learning modules for, again, your entire staff, all the adults in your school. There's a resource library, and then under curriculum, you'll see early childhood through high school. And then under tools, you'll see this mood meter where you can do group mood meter plots. In the classroom curriculum, I mentioned you'll see routines that you can just kind of seamlessly embed into what you're already doing in the classroom. And then you'll see in early childhood, you'll see all of the units they associate with a feeling word. So each Feeling word has its own unit, and you'll go through a series of steps for each word so that students can connect those words to their experiences, to the curriculum, or in pre-K relate to storybooks, and bring something home. So, Mom, I learned about the word happy today. And then just a conversation around what can we do to feel happy, for instance. In elementary, there are feeling words lessons like the word connected here. There are also lessons that tie directly to the tools that we went through. So community safety climate is about the charter, and there are 18 units per grade. And again, more core routines that embed seamlessly into any classroom. For middle school, we have 20 lessons per grade, and it's a combination of core routines and project-based ideas so that you can integrate into any subject area all of these emotional intelligence lessons with an optional project for, say, English language arts or social studies or math. And then finally, for our oldest students, we have our high school curriculum. We have two different formats for the high school curriculum. We have one that you can just show on, say, a smartboard or project somewhere in your classroom with videos and little activities and prompts for games and conversations. Or we have some standard kind of PDFs where you can just use it as a script and decide how to run the lesson in your classroom without projecting anything on the screen. The lessons for high school really focus on where students are in high school. For instance, in year one, you'll see emotions matter for my high school experience in these ways. We go into how emotions matter for choices and relationships, identity, well-being, and then ultimately in year 4 of the high school curriculum, how emotions affect emotions and our emotion skills affect our adult lives and our future. And then all of our families content is phased. So we've talked about phase 1 as our staff development phase. So that's the first thing you're going to do when you go back to your schools. Phase 2 is the student learning pieces and includes more families content. And then phase 3 is really kind of sustaining and innovating over time. So our families content is phase. And again, you'll see like slide decks you can use on a parent night, letters you can send home with your students or directly to families, lots of resources for engaging and educating families. I mentioned out of school time resources. We have some different toolkits with lessons and activities, basically to reinforce ruler in your spaces after school or summer school, or even at recess. So any space kind of outside of the classroom. So I'm almost done here before I hand it over to Mark, but basically I want to remind you that you have some time to plan for ruler rollout in your school, to go through the skills and the tools. And really the most important thing is to think of ruler as a mindset. It's just a way of acknowledging that emotions affect all of us. They affect everything we do in school. They affect our relationships. They affect whether your students are going to pay attention, whether they're going to remember what's happening. They affect you as you lead your classroom or as you lead your school if you're a principal. Ruler is a common language for us to use to keep with that mindset and to talk to each other about how we're feeling and how we can manage our emotions. And it's just really an embodiment. It's a way of being. Ultimately, you do want to plan for a comprehensive training across all of your staff and your students and the adults in their lives. And that's really important that you build in some planning time into the next 6 months to a year to think about how you're going to roll things out. And the last thing I'll say about planning is our research shows that it's really important to start with the adults, and that's why we have all of these staff development components, including this training and the learning modules and the staff meeting activities. But you don't have to do everything with adults first and then bring it to students. You could do a little bit with the adults in the school and then a little bit with the students. So for instance, you could spend 6 months to 2 full years going through the emotions matter mindset and the ruler skills and the ruler tools with only your staff, and then wait until year 2 or year 3 to bring things to students. Or you could do some things with the emotions matter mindset with adults and then do the same thing with students. Build a charter at the staff level, build a charter in your classrooms. So there are a couple of different ways, there are actually lots of different ways you can approach this. Ruler's really flexible in that way. Pick something that works for your school community. Final piece from me, you should have received an invitation to the Ruler online platform. If not, you might want to check your spam, or if you still don't see it, email us at ruler.online@yale.edu and we'll get you that invitation. And you can invite every single adult in your school to the Ruler online platform. And that way they can get access to all the information you learned in the training, as well as all of the classroom curricular components and core routines that I mentioned. You will receive an email about coaching soon. We highly, highly, highly recommend you come to us, come to our coaching sessions. They're office hours, so you can pop in, sign up for coaching sessions to really get guidance on any of the questions that you have and on building your rollout plan. There's a guide in week 6 materials that you may have seen in the training portal that really takes you through step-by-step how to implement Ruler with your staff in your school. There are monthly newsletters that we'll be sending to you and all of those who attended training. We have webinars throughout the year, and we'll alert you in the newsletters about the webinars, as well as any news about Ruler or any research that comes out or any additions to our resource library. And I am going to turn it over to Mark in a recording for the rest of our webinar.
Well, welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Brackett. I'm the director of the center and one of the creators of Ruler. And I think what I'm going to do today is really kind of try to pull it all together. There's lots of flexibility, but you know, nothing is as flexible as a good plan. So I want to encourage you to reach out to your coach and set up that coaching session so you can really think through your school community, your context, and just build out the best possible implementation plan. Because what I'll tell you from the 25 years that I have running around the world doing this work is that the best implementation comes from people who have the best plan. And with that said, I am going to share my slides. Maybe just do a quick inhale and exhale. And let's just check in. So you have all become resident experts at the mood meter. At least that's what I'm expecting. And so let's go to the chat. And where are you at today? How are my participants feeling? Got some green and yellows, a little blue. Surprisingly green. Yellows and greens. A lot of green. Now remember, lesson number 1 of the mood meter is, well, it's not lesson number 1, but it is critical that we don't want to walk around just saying what color we're in, right? We want to get granular and specific. So I need you all to go to your feeling words. What's the word? What's the feeling word that you're having as we enter into our final session today? Contentment. A little calm, a little content. Feeling accomplished. That's a good feeling to have for a training. Thoughtful, restless. Yep. Calm and focused. Nice combo there. A little busy, a little somewhat relaxed, tired and calm. I'm like tired and wired and focused and a little calm. Anybody else have like not just 1 or 2 emotions, but you feel like you're simultaneously feeling like 3 or 4 or 5 emotions? Okay, so I'm not alone. I say once it's 10 or more, you really have to, you know, that's tier 2. But tier 1, we can go up to maybe 5. Remember with the mood meter, when you're working with the adults in your community, the goal is to get your colleagues to really not think about this as, the poster that, that you hang up in your classroom, but really as a way of life. And I say that with fervor, meaning that the goal of the mood meter is to help us develop a process for building greater self-awareness and social awareness, and a process for thinking about what strategies are going to be most or least helpful to dealing with our feelings in the moment. So you're applying the principles and the skills in the tools, meaning the principles of emotions matter, the skills of ruler, with the tool, within the tool. Before we move forward, though, I want to see if there's any questions about our fancy mood meter tool here. Any questions about teaching it? Any questions about using it? Any questions about why it is what it is? Anything. Just take a moment and think about it. Is there anything that you're dying to know about the mood meter, or a question that you would like to have answered? I'm going to give you 1 minute to just think about that. Great question, Lauren. Is that you got to sell this with the science, that how we as educators feel, how teachers, students, staff feel, is influencing everything. As you've learned from the training, how we feel is influencing our attention. It's influencing how teachers grade students' papers. It's influencing well-being, relationships, etc., mental health. And so there's no greater gift than being emotionally self-aware, because if you can label it, then you can do something about it, or you can regulate it. So I just go back to that the more conscious we are of how we're feeling, the better able we're going to be to support ourselves and to support other people in applying healthy strategies for regulating. And, Lauren, another thing to think about it is that, there's, in the moment, like right here, right now, how are you feeling? And then you could do this, and we recommend this, 3 or 4 times a year in faculty meetings and staff meetings, where you just say, like, where have you been living on the mood meter? Like, let's take a minute and just like think about this seriously. Like in the last 2 weeks, when you've been running around this school in faculty meetings and staff meetings and teaching your classes, whatever you're doing in your job, counselor, where have you been living? What percentage of the time have you been in the yellow, red, blue, or green? And then ask people, is that working for you? Or is that working against you? How's that impacting your performance? How's it impacting your relationships? The more reflective you can be with this tool, with any of the ruler tools, the better. We don't want to be like telling people so much as welcoming people into a conversation around emotion. Does that make sense? Just give me a thumbs up, people. Does that feel like comfortable in terms of like pitching the work to your colleagues? Pitching is always the hardest, but I would reframe that, Lauren, and frame it as, I'm giving my entire school community a gift of a tool that helps them build greater emotional awareness so they can have greater well-being, be better at their relationships, and have better mental health. Yeah, so Tyrene, good question about student level. My recommendation, and when you get into the classroom level curriculum, there's guidelines for this, just so you know. But we start with introducing a few words by actually getting the students themselves to think about the words they already know for the mood meter, and then build the mood meter throughout the year with kids using our lesson plans for the feeling words, and then just words that come up in different stories that are feelings that you can then add to your mood meter wall. Any other questions about our new best friend, the mood meter? So that's the mood meter. Lots of different, stuff going on with the mood meter in terms of building awareness. How many of you are familiar with our new free app called How We Feel? Has anybody downloaded the How We Feel app yet? Brian's saying he loves it. Yes, we've got people doing it. It's now available on Android and on iPhone, so it's all access. It's free. It's a great tool, to get teachers to use on their own outside of school with their families. Brings you buy-in in terms of the applicability of it. Remember, on the platform, we have a mood meter tool that you can use to do group check-ins and faculty meetings and with your students. Okay. So I thought it would be interesting to just look at some of the data that we've done in the last couple of years as a review. Last year, all the teachers that we interviewed said they were anxious. This year, they said they were overwhelmed. Isn't that great? So we went from feeling tremendous uncertainty about the world to feeling, I've had enough, I'm saturated. Can anyone relate to that at this time of the year? Anyone else feeling just like saturated with feelings? And interestingly enough, in our recent survey, our annual conference, we found among, about 700 ruler school participants, teachers are struggling with just feeling frustrated. Some are doing well. Some nuns there, but frustration is the one that people are struggling with, not necessarily the overwhelm that they're feeling. Any thoughts about that? Thoughts on why we as educators, you all as educators, are struggling with frustration? Does that resonate with people? Just a lot of demands, not a little time, a lot of pressure, so much to do, so little time. Yeah. Now, when we asked in our surveys about a year and a half ago, the number one emotion that teachers said they wanted to feel was appreciated. Back when we had our conference in March, what ruler people's data showed was that calm was the number one emotion. And I thought that was kind of interesting, that, as you build out your charters, you might want to think about the when you're revising your charters, are you doing this at a certain time of the year? So that different emotions pop up for people. I find it quite interesting that people were just really wanting to feel appreciated a couple of years ago. But recently people are just, I think, want to feel calm. And that's probably related to the frustration and the overwhelm, right? That we just want to feel a little bit in that green quadrant. Importantly, I think this conversation around how we feel and how we want to feel can be helpful, on a regular basis. So just like the mood meter, where you're going back throughout the year and checking in with people about where they've been living on the mood meter, the same thing applies to the charter. You don't want to just build your charter, let's say in August of this summer, to release it in September, and then say, like, this is how we want to feel. We're going to try to make that happen. That's fine, but it's not ruler. What ruler is about is, firstly, applying the principle of the charter to every meeting we have, the way we teach, the way we interact with each other. And then, we can also think of strategies to help us experience the emotions that we want to feel. So sometimes, if I'm feeling frustrated and overwhelmed, it's hard to think about the strategies that will make me feel calm. But if I think about how I want to feel, like, Mark, I want to feel calm. What can you do to feel calm? Oh, I can take some deep breaths. I can go to yoga later. I can call a friend. My point here is that if you get stuck with kind of what to do with your feelings, just take a moment to think about an emotion that you'd like to feel, and that might open up some pathways towards healthy regulation. Any questions about that? Questions going once? You can use the Q&A or the chat. I thought it would be also interesting for you to see that, while many of you have heard there's been some controversies and some pushback, for the field of social and emotional learning, every one of you and every educator that we've surveyed over the last couple of years have all said inadvertently that SEL matters, because the top hope that educators have for their students is well-being and happiness, being socially responsible adults, independent, successful at work, that they have these skills, that they treat others with kindness and respect, resilience and persistence, have purpose and meaning. So take a moment to think about that. How many of you see the direct link between social and emotional learning, and at least the ones in the top 3 or 4? Give me a yes if that makes sense to you. Yes. Like, all due respect to our science and math teachers. I want to be good at math. I want to be good at science. But my well-being is going to come from my awareness and my strategies. Social responsibility is going to come from learning how to interact with people in a healthy way. My ability to treat others with kindness and respect and be resilient. And guess what? When we ask parents in our most recent studies, what do you want for your kids? Lo and behold, they say the same thing. I want happiness, well-being, and life satisfaction to describe their life. Career satisfaction and happiness, financial stability, social life and romantic relationships are satisfying. Now, we've also tried to figure out what's getting in the way. And so at our national conference, we asked all the ruler schools that have been doing ruler for more than you have been doing it for a couple years or more, what's going on? What's getting in the way? The first, I'm going to say, excuse is time. The second, I'm going to say, excuse is colleague buy-in. And a third could be a real one, which is admin support. Now, I'm joking with you about excuse, but for me, the first one in terms of time, it's really a value proposition. Does that resonate with you? That if we're a school that truly values social and emotional learning, we just figure out how to make the time. That's what I've noticed in the 4,000 plus schools that we work with. Colleague buy-in is, going back to that first question about the mood meter by Lauren. And yeah, it's a concern, but I'm here to tell you, your life cannot be about trying to just convince people that, to do this work. You just got to be the role model for it. And either the people, when there's a good leader who talks about this, regularly and says, we're committed to this, and shows people the pathway, people will just get on the bus, or some people are just going to not want to get on the bus and hopefully go someplace else. This is why that last piece on admin support is so critical. That if you're a school principal or head of school on this call, please know you play a major role in the quality and sustainability of this work. And anything and everything you can do to communicate the value and importance of this work being done systemically within your school is going to go really far. Any other barriers that you find that you're, if you think about your implementation at your site, what are you concerned about? Do you have any concerns, or you feel like we're going to rock and roll with Rula? Yeah, this is just one more thing. So, Brian, if your school has done 3,552 trainings on bullying prevention and SEL and well-being, and none of them have worked and none of them have had follow through, yeah, that's a problem. So, Brian, the key thing is having a quality implementation plan over the next few years, making the commitment, making sure the leader and the ruler team expresses that commitment. That will go a long way. If they just think, years ago I used to do workshops, and people say, oh, well, you did the workshop. I'm like, yeah, that was just like to get people excited about it. That's not the work. The work is like, this is like your school um, principal. We got to have a plan. Adult development, continuous improvement of the adults, student implementation, families. Yeah, Jeffrey. So there is student buy-in too. And what I will tell you about student buy-in is that it's directly related to educator buy-in, meaning if the adults educators are the best possible role models, what you'll find is that students will be interested and engage in it. I mean, I've had a lot of experience with this where I've gone to a high school, for example, where they roll their eyes at things like the mood meter, and then I observe a few lessons and I see that it's being baby sized or babyized. And so you got to know your audience. And so my challenge to all of you is to figure out, how do you make this relevant to your audience? What's going on in your school community, that's challenging in terms of bullying, in terms of healthy emotion regulation, drugs, alcohol, other kinds of things. And make sure you tie in what people value to the work. No, so Rachel, you're going to get very specific. There are about 12 emotion words per year, all the way from kindergarten to middle school. And so literally by the time a kid goes to high school, they've learned something like 84 different emotions. And they know what those emotions mean. They know the causes of those feelings. Like, they know how those feelings kind of affect their relationships and their health and their performance. They've had conversations around it. They've interviewed family members about it. They've talked about healthy regulation for it. So have no fear. In the beginning, the mood meter will be general, but then as students go deeper into the lessons, the granularity really happens. And by granularity, I mean that kind of precision in language happens. All right, so we've got about 20 minutes left, and I thought what I would do is just take you through, many of the things I've just shared, actually, but in a more sequential way, and some of the things that I think can be important for you to keep in mind in terms of doing this work well in your school. Okay, so here we go. You all have on the platform very specific modules to teach people the science and the skills of emotional intelligence. Give me a thumbs up or a yes in the chat if you are going to commit yourself, your school community, to getting on that platform and finding ways to get everybody at your school to learn about the science of emotions and emotional intelligence. All right. Looks like I can just go for coffee. Awesome. So remember, there's some core principles here. Emotions are information. Right? That's a core principle of ruler. All emotions matter. Ruler and SEL is about learning how to use all emotions wisely. We're going to give ourselves permission to feel and be emotion scientists, not emotion judges. So if you attended my opening webinar, you know that this is the construct that's near and dear to my heart, which is this concept of permission to feel. It's a major mindset for this work, meaning that if we know that all emotions matter, what that tells us is that we have to give ourselves and everyone we love, care about, and even the people we don't love that much, maybe the people we just work with part-time, the permission to be their true, full feeling selves too. So permission to feel is really at its core having a mindset that there's no such thing as a bad emotion, that all emotions are information and data. And when I've asked you and others in the past to describe the people who gave them permission to feel, it's compassionate, it's empathic, non-judgmental. Those are the top three. Every single study, empathetic or empathic, non-judgmental, compassionate, and then unconditional love, supportive, etc., validating. Give me a yes if you are making a commitment to giving yourself the permission to feel all emotions, even the uncomfortable ones. I was telling someone today that, during the pandemic, I think my anxiety was skyrocketed. I mean, I don't think I was the only one. And there came a point where I was like, Mark, stop trying to not feel anxious. There's a lot to be anxious about. Just you need to give yourself the permission to feel anxious and change your relationship to the anxiety. Don't give away all that power to the anxiety. That's the challenge, right? Permission to feel doesn't mean I let the emotion just like rule my life. It means I allow myself to feel it, but I still have to have strategies to deal with it. Does that make sense to everybody? Just want to check in. Does that feel cool? I want to make sure that makes sense. It's important for everybody. This is the other issue. I just constantly hear this like, stay positive, think positive. And while it is helpful to be able to be optimistic and hopeful, it's tricky, and so my point here, so it is toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is that kind of like, everything's going to be fine. Like, okay, glad you think it's going to be fine. If you were walking in my shoes, you maybe wouldn't say that because, I don't know, a little scary to me. And so maybe it's a defense mechanism, not sure, can be. But key point for ruler is that we're not going to strive to feel one emotion at any time, all the time. We're going to strive to be true to our feeling selves and be aware of our feelings and then think about, are those feelings helping us or are they getting in the way of our well-being and health and relationships? It's a different perspective. Does that resonate with people? That perspective? That we're going to be aware of our feelings, but we're not going to like set a goal to feel one emotion all the time. We may decide after doing some mood meter check-ins on the app or in real world, that, wow, I am a lot more blue than I anticipated. That's affecting me in ways I'm not happy about. I want to get 10% happier. The next thing is that, I don't know why, but some people forget that these are real skills. These are not soft skills. These are like seriously, quote unquote, hard skills to develop. And we need to just let people see that. Again, I like to help people see that through research, that when we measure these skills of ruler and we ask people to fill out those skill-based measures of ruler, and then we also look at their burnout, their job satisfaction, the quality of their relationships, we see strong relationships to motivate people to see the value and importance of the skills. How many of you have ever known someone who is very unemotionally intelligent? Has anyone here ever lived with or work with someone who is kind of really low in these skills? They just don't have that self-awareness, that that ability to regulate their feelings. And how many of you, when you think of that person, say to yourself something like, I want to work with them and be with them all the time for the rest of my life? No, it's really difficult to be around people who are not emotionally skilled. They walk on eggshells. Gotta be careful about everything you say. It's challenging. These skills matter. They matter for our relationships, our health, our performance. It's draining, as you say. Ruler skills, R-U-L-E-R. Any questions about these skills? I spent 25 years doing research on emotional intelligence and defining these skills with my colleagues, measuring these skills, studying these skills, teaching these skills. Now's your chance. Anything that comes to mind for you that you want more clarity on? Laura, I appreciate your honesty. Yes, it's going to take time. You know, it's funny, when I wrote my first book, Permission to Feel, it was the first time I outlined in one chapter each of the ruler skills. When we as a team would write papers on this, we'd write a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, maybe 3, but never, 7,000 words. And it was amazing to me as I was doing the research, how much I'd forgotten, how nuanced the research is for each of these skills. There's a lot to learn. It's exciting, especially when you add in culture and race and religion and other factors. Just like becomes a beautifully complex project. All right, looks like we got some clarity. I'm reading your question. I believe that labeling with accuracy is hard because the person feeling the emotions knows more than someone else trying to label it. Yeah. We never want to label someone else's emotions for them. It's critically important. We're never going to say, oh, you're angry. We can only do that, A, if we have a good relationship, and B, if we're clear from the stories that we're being told that we understand the cause of their experience. So if you're getting all that unmet expectation, it sounds like you're disappointed. If you're getting all that injustice, it's pretty clear from what at least what I'm hearing is that you're angry. Same thing with like someone who walks in that's just a major accomplishment and they feel pride. Lauren, when you say dive into consequences, do you mean like behavioral consequences? Yes, young students don't always know how and what they're feeling, which is why we need to provide direct instruction. And when you teach young children through storybooks, right, it's critically important for you, the adult educator doing this, to have your rich emotion vocabulary to make sure that you are clear about why we have the feelings, so that when you're doing the character analysis and showing text-based evidence for why a character feels the way they do, you're spot on with the emotion science. If you don't have the emotion science background, then you'll kind of clump things into sadness or fear when they might be worry or disappointment, etc. All right. Just a few kind of key points here I wanted to share about going deeper with these skills. Just remember that, you know, we feel these emotions um, based on our life experience. And what I mean by that, when I say the emotions are constructed, what I mean is that, if you grew up in a family where there was a lot of anger, you're going to have a different relationship to anger than a family where there was no anger. I grew up in a family where there was just a tremendous amount of anxiety. My mother was anxious about this and that and this. So like, I just have a lot more kind of like exposure to the anxiety family than maybe other people do. If you grew up in a family that was a suppressor family, like nobody talked about feelings and never showed any feelings, that's going to impact, the way you experience emotions. We got to have the vocabulary, right? The deeper our vocabulary, the better able we're going to be to understand our emotions. There are a lot of factors, whether it be race or gender or ethnicity, right, that impact how we read people's emotions. We need to be mindful that there are unjust rules in society about who gets to express emotions. As a white male who works at Yale, right? That is, in America anyway, a very privileged position to be in. And I need to be aware of that when I'm interacting with people, because that will impact how people feel. And I know that, my husband is a man of color. And the rules are different in many ways in our society. We know that from all too many case studies across the last 450 years in our society. And I think part of what we have to figure out with Ruler and what we have to do on a daily basis just in life, right, is just acknowledge the fact that people of different backgrounds experience emotions in different ways. We may not be able to relate to their experiences because we're not them, but we can deeply respect their experiences and support them in every way we possibly can. And that leads to this idea of ethnocentrism, which is a larger cultural thing, which is the way I see things is the way everybody should see things. Eye contact means you got to look at me this way because that's what's correct, because that's what they do on Wall Street. And if they do it on Wall Street, they do it everywhere. Well, everywhere is relative. They don't do it in places where I go to study my martial art in South Korea. And so the universality piece of this, we need to be really careful about. There are local rules around how we express emotions, and that's fine. Just be curious. Be the emotion scientist, not the emotion judge. With regulation, key piece here, there's no right strategy. We don't tell people how to regulate. You must take deep breaths, think positively. It's not going to work. What we have to do is support people in finding the strategies that work best for them. So to teach them the areas of healthy regulation and support them with finding the best strategies for them. It is work. And, I think, our center, I personally have been criticized about like, gosh, this is complicated. And I've just come to the conclusion that it's like permission to feel. Emotions are complicated, but I'm gonna give myself the permission to feel it and work with it. And I'm going to give myself the permission to understand that doing this work in a very high level way with long-term quality and sustainability is hard. And that's okay. I'm grateful that you're on the journey. And now that you're on the journey, you can make it your life's work. Just like if you work out, right? You're trying to build your biceps. You don't do any bicep curls for 3 years, your biceps are going to shrink. Well, your emotional intelligence is going to shrink, right? If you don't practice it. Does this make sense to everybody? Just want to pause there for a minute. Like, just accept the complexity. It's good. The hardest things in life are generally, they take time to learn. So don't get down on yourself if like somebody doesn't agree with you, or don't get down on yourself if you don't use a good strategy to regulate. You got your whole life to practice. Get a teacher who doesn't buy in. It's like, don't let them have that power over you. Like, who are they to have power over you? Because they want to be destructive to themselves and your school community, right? Whenever I see someone who is really negative or who is kind of wants to be destructive, I take them on as my ruler project. And I pretend that I'm like a creative genius. I pretend, I know I'm not one. I pretend that I'm a creative genius. And I'm like, I got to find a way to reach this person. Like, my job is to reach this person. And I just play with it, and I think creatively and strategically. If you have that mindset around your rollout, great things will happen, I promise you. If you get derailed, or you start feeling anxious about it's not going the way you anticipated, a little bit of anxiety is okay. It'll make you work hard. But you just keep doing it. A few final things that I just want to share. One is, Ruler is what we call a universal primary prevention approach to SEL. That means every single person in your school community gets an emotion education. I'm going to say that again. That means every single person in your school community gets an emotion education. That's primary prevention. Intervention is when a student has a learning difference and they get extra services, or whatever the challenge is for a particular student, they get extra service. That's the tier 2, targeted interventions. Tier 3, sometimes outpatient, treatment, or really, specified. The problem with intervention is not that it's not good, it's critically important. But we're not going to reduce the number of new cases that come into the system if we don't do the prevention work. So prevention plus some intervention, not intervention and no, prevention is first. A next step for lasting impact, right, is this has got to become part of the immune system. So as you're doing this work in your faculty meetings, how much time are you dedicating? When it's time for families, how are you keeping them engaged and keeping them apprised of the information, ensuring that students go home and teach the lessons? When it's the classroom, is there real time to do this work for kids? That's that castle wheel. It's classrooms, it's schools, it's communities and families. With that said, while Ruler is a primary prevention approach, we do need to be mindful and ensure that Ruler is reaching all children in the ways that we would like it to be reaching them. And so we need to understand, we do have parent workshops for sure. And those can start right after you launch Ruler in your school by building awareness of the value and importance of emotions. You want to avoid jumping right into all the tools until students are learning those tools. But building awareness around the science and practice of emotional intelligence, there's letters you can send home, there's basic workshops you can run. The last thing I'm going to say is that, right, with Ruler, we want lasting impact and change. So we're not the train and hope model, we're the train and find your coach and get your coaching model. We're not going to just talk about one thing about whether it's mindfulness, or breathing exercises. Ruler is a comprehensive approach, and we want to work over time to build out all the skills of Ruler, right? We want to help you kind of look through everything you're doing in your school and kind of get rid of all the fragments and try to do the work at a systemic level. Use Ruler as your overarching SEL framework. And obviously support you in getting metrics to help think about the outcomes that you're interested in. One thing you can do to help you with your initial rollout is think about, what are we solving for? What's the one thing that we want to really focus on in school? Is it teacher stress and burnout? Is it positive culture and climate? Is it student attendance and engagement? And that will lead you to using some materials versus others within Ruler. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, families are an important piece of our work. Students spend a lot of time at home. We want to build that common language with parents. We know that parents are distracted more than ever before. In some recent research I've done, parents are like, I don't have the time to teach these skills. So we got to let them see the value and importance of it themselves. And then finally, just think about your whole school policy, right? How is Ruler going to be embedded into suspension, hiring, bullying? How much accountability are you going to have within your school community for making sure Ruler is a permanent, fun part of it? So I'm going to stop there. Everybody take a nice long inhale and a nice long exhale, because I know we're coming to the end. Just take a nice long inhale and exhale. So I can't tell you there's nothing to be anxious about, because that would not be responsible, right? But I can tell you is that we are here to support you through the entire process of rolling Ruler out in your school. Let me wrap by saying, I wish there was a magic pill. There were a magic pill that I can give all of you, and you'd be highly emotionally intelligent, everyone in your community would be, and you'd have embedded Ruler into everything that you're doing. It's a process. So just give yourself that grace. Recognize it's a process, and recognize it's a process that's a gift to you. It's a gift to your community. It's a gift to your students' health and well-being, their academic performance. And remember that we are here to work with you. So never hesitate to reach out. Make sure you go through all the content on the online community and work with your coach to figure out the best way to bring Ruler into your community. And on that note, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. We are honored and delighted to be in partnership with you, and best wishes on a tremendously positive rollout. And thank you all. Thank you to our team who's here today, who were your coaches and trainers. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can follow me, which is just Mark Brackett, I think, on Instagram, and then Ruler Approach for Ruler materials. Social media is a great way to stay in touch with us. And be well, share the secret, and bye-bye.